wanted to share with you this event about diversity, equity, inclusion. Myself, Bill Davis, and Donnell Duncan really get into the nuts and bolts about diversity, equity, inclusion in infrastructure and the problems and experiences we had from our past and what's currently happening and why we need to change the way we do things in culture and things like that. It's called The Impact of Upbringing on Perceptions and Attitude. Hope you like it. Have a great day. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. Today, we have two amazing guests joining us on the network, Donnell Duncan and Bill Davis. And we've had conversations with Donnell and Duncan and Bill before on podcasts and different events, but today's kind of unique. So, Donnell, I'm going to start off with your introduction. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what's going on. And then, Bill, you'll be next. And then we'll start with the topic.
Well, yeah, Donnell Duncan, I have a lot going on. At the core, I begin with what I do as a professional. So I'm a structural engineer, and I'm an associate vice president at Arcadis, a consulting firm in the environmental space. I'm also someone who you would call a super volunteer. So I'm always volunteering. So I volunteer with several organizations and continue to do so. The Water Environment Federation, I'm the Speaker of the House, the American Waterworks Association, I'm the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I find ways to make myself useful. I'm also a pastor. So for those of you who aren't on that side of my life, I probably spend more time preaching the word than I spend doing many of the other things that I do. That's really what I spend a lot of my time in. So yeah, that's a nutshell version of me. So I'll send it across to Bill.
Well, I don't do near. You didn't mention author and all this other stuff you do.
You did forget that.
He forgot a lot of things because I was like, I don't know if I could even summarize all the things that I even know about you, much less everything else. But my name is Bill Davis. I've been a consultant most of my career. A couple of times now, I've been involved in municipalities, and I'm running a small enterprise in Richland County, South Carolina, right now, which is providing water and sewer services. But my background is a professional engineer designing water and wastewater infrastructure. So I've done that for 34 years. I really have enjoyed it. And for about 28 years, I've been a volunteer in the Water Environment Association of South Carolina. And most recently, in the last few years, I've been working on the House of Delegates with Donnell. And I've actually become the nominee for Speaker of the House, which have not been approved by the body yet. But I'm looking forward to that. I got big shoes to fill, obviously, but that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Well, it's been great knowing you guys in the last year or so. We've been having these discussions digitally and different podcasts and events, and truly thank you both for joining the network as well as the audience. I'm sure does too, because you guys are very influential in the industry, especially when it comes to water, sewer, and just in infrastructure in general. Like we said, Donnell has a book. We're going to talk about the end, so don't worry about that, Donnell. But today we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a hot topic. It's one of those things where, Donnell, you kind of brought up something like, where's it end? Like, where does it start and where's it end? And what is it maybe? Because there's maybe people like myself that don't really understand it. I get it. And I know there's a need for it, but maybe I don't even understand, like, what is diversity? What is equity? Was inclusion, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, you brought that to my attention today when we had a conversation. It was like what's equity? Well, equality, right? It's having an equal playing field, I guess you should say, versus everybody else and being able to do things. So starting off, I have, since we had some back and forth with emails, I got a question for you both. How can we create a respectful dialogue around race, gender, diversity, acknowledging the complexities without unintentionally offending others? Who wants to start with that one? That was a Bill.
You want me to go
Bill. He threw it right at you.
All right, so I'll go first. I think I go back and I'm trying to remember his name. Donnell might remember. I think he's from New York. He's a middle-aged black gentleman that came to the Nashville Water Environment Association, WEF Max, and he was probably one of the only people in the room That was Kentucky, Tennessee, and he was one of the only people in the room that was a person of color. And we had people talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the people that were talking were kind of middle-aged, older white guys. And the question came up as to what can we do about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I raised my hand and I said, well, one of the things we can do is why do we have all these old white guys talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion? And he stood up and he said something that I kind of never will forget. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago, and he said, "The fact that the old white men are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion means that we're making progress."
Mm.
And that really struck home for me, and it kind of brought me to a different place where I can actually start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and stop being afraid to talk about the things that are really affecting all of us. And I think that openness is one of the ways, being honest and open and sincere. I think people see sincerity and they know when you're fake and they know when you're real.
Yeah,
So
that's a good one.
take a chance.
Yeah. How about you, Donnell?
So the question of how do we have the conversation about
Hmm.
race, gender, about ethnicity? How do we have the conversation about DE and I in an environment where it's productive and it's not going to turn people off and offend them? Is I think it begins with making sure we're clear with what we're defining and clear with the context of the conversation. Because everybody in their imagination
Hmm.
thinks they know where this conversation is going to go. And that's based on our experience, it's based on television, it's based on the stuff we're seeing at our kitchen table. So as soon as somebody says something, we think we know where it's going. We think we know the person's intentions. We think we know what the conversation is about. So we form an opinion immediately.
Yeah.
If it's positive, you think, oh, this is going to be a great conversation. If it's negative, you think it's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to you. Not because of the essence of what's about to be said, but because of your own personal perceptions. So I was talking to a utility leader the other day, and what she was telling me was it's so important to level set when the conversation is about to begin to make sure everybody's on the same page. To
Mm.
say, all right, hey, we're about to have a conversation about this, and this is what we mean when we say this. Because surprisingly, if everybody got what we're actually talking about, from the perspective of this is the big picture, there may be a lot more heads nodding and a lot more agreement and a lot more, oh, that's what we're going to say? All right, well, let's talk.
Yeah.
Because people then understand why we're doing this and what we're doing it for and the context instead of everybody's imagination going in different directions. And then we emotionally respond to what has not been said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That's a great point. Yeah. Having a, we didn't kind of establish that when we started this conversation. That's actually one of the things you just brought up. So, but I think we are missing a lot of the things around the communities, more around the communities, diversity, equity, inclusion when it comes to the communities and things like that. And Bill, you brought up one thing you said about how do you approach, well, this is a question actually for you, Bill. How do you approach
Mm.
promoting diversity in your hiring process, for example? And what significance do you see in recognizing individuals' unique backgrounds?
Yeah, I think I have a lot to say about that. I
Yeah.
think from my perspective, as I went to that meeting in Nashville, I think it was the first time, as a person who's had opportunity, it may be the first time I realized how really limited the diversity in the room was.
Mm.
And so I know it sounds silly, but I'm an engineer, so I do things based on statistics and facts. And so I would start counting the room. How many women are in the room? Hmm. How many people of color are in the room? And I would see that the statistics we'll talk about started popping out, and it was a lot of older white men in the room. And so I started thinking, well, I really want to be diverse. And I think one of the first times it ever got noticed, I was at the city of Columbia, and we had an engineering program. And again, engineering, there was only that I can remember two women in my engineering class at school. And so I got approached by one of the project managers that was actually my program manager for an engineering firm I was working with while I was at the city of Columbia. And he came to me and he said, I got something remarkable to tell you. And I'm like, well, what is it? He said, did you know that 50% of the consultants we've hired are women? I said, well, isn't that about what it's supposed to be? And he said, yeah. I said, well, we're doing a good job. So, I mean, it's just noticing and maybe not down to the, percentage, even though I do that sometimes, but, down, what does my demographic look like? Does my demographic look like the people that I serve, like in my customer base represented in my employees? And if it's not, ask the questions, why is my demographic not match my customer base? Because we're working in the same area. They should kind of match. And so that's something that I've been mindful of, I think.
What do you think about that, Donnell?
That's great. I think the thing I like about just our overall approach to this is that hiring is the driver behind bringing people in.
Mm-hmm.
And the president of WEF, Ifetal Venner, once said, we can't talk about increasing diversity if the people are not there.
That's right.
There you go.
So it's easy to say, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. Yeah, but you can't do it without the actual people being present. So hiring is the entry point between somebody who is an outsider becoming an insider. How do we get them through the door into the organization? And it starts there. What doors are we opening and what doors are we closing?
Yeah.
And I believe we have to be proactive, because there are people who think, well, it's just going to work itself out. Well, how has it worked itself out the last couple hundred years?
Yeah.
So working itself out is a dream that we will never wake up from. We have to be proactive and we have to be intentional. And yes, we get it. There are so many arguments against why you should be doing it. There are so many excuses against it. And we understand that. Those of us who are really good at making up excuses, we'll always have one.
Yeah.
But if we know we have to be intentional, then how are we going to make the difference? So for some organizations, it's, hey, maybe we need to widen the net that we cast. Maybe we need to deepen the pool that we're digging into. Maybe we need to extend the pipeline further. Maybe we need to go further into the pipeline to try to build the pipeline. There are actionable steps we have to take just so that at least people have a chance to get into our organizations.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the work begins once they're in. But we have to try to get them in first, so we have something to work with. So, I mean, I like what Bill is saying, and it's worth it. It's worth it. It might be uncomfortable at first, but change is uncomfortable.
You got it.
It is. So the hiring process, you talked about that, Donnell. The hiring process is where we can change the opportunity. And I think changing the opportunity can be taken two different ways. Like if we say, what are the detractors going to say? Well, you're hiring them because of their color. No, I don't do that. I hire a good candidate. Now, I am looking for women and I'm looking for people of color and I'm looking for the people that represent like operators, the people that have done that for a living, the people that want to do that, the people that may not be seeking going to college, that want to do the blue collar type work. And we have a lot of that. I have a mix. I have engineering and blue collar work. And I try to find those. And when I find them, I don't hire them just because of their color or just because of their gender. I search for people that have the skill sets and the ability to learn the skill sets that we want to teach them here at Richland County. And we've got a great group of new people coming in, and it's really exciting for me to see the changes that we're making in our demographics and the inclusion that we're having with young people, older people. It's just really nice to see the mix.
Yeah.
And we like the culture. It's a cultural change that's positive.
Yeah. One thing that I've had discussions with other people about is skill sets, bringing populations from communities up and educating them on new technologies, for example, being able to code now, being able to fix technologies like Tesla vehicles or something like that, right? And all of our infrastructure is starting to go smart, right? So we're going to need people skilled with the ability to fix technology and software, coding, things like that. And I just met with a lady Pan Learn was her name from Launch Code, and she was telling me about like their training, different diversity in communities to get them up to speed on like where they can fit into these jobs that you guys are talking about. I think that's where we're going to need to go in the future for sure, is get the communities built up and the education there. Donnell, I got a question for you based on our emails back and forth. What are some of the common objections and misconceptions you have encountered regarding DEI and initiatives, and how do you address them?
And I like that because it segues well with something Bill was saying. There is this misconception that when someone says, hey, we need to do something about the diversity of our workforce or the diversity of our team, that we're now going to risk the quality of the people that we're getting. And I'll tell you where that comes from. And I'm going to go deep with this. It comes from a superiority complex. What does that mean? When you have a superiority complex, you think that anybody other than you is inferior. As a result, if you open the door for somebody that's different to you, you're instantly opening the door to an inferior person. So you object. I can't have diversity in my group because I'm about to bring in somebody inferior. We can't do that. We want the best, and the best is me. So anybody else is not the best. So I don't want to open the door. No, we can't have a candidate that's different, because the assumption is you don't even know the person. You never met the person. But as long as the person's not like you, the person's inferior. So when you give the person a shot, because you just presume up front, because you are superior, people like you are superior. And the only reason why you're the only ones with the opportunities is because you're the best. Not because you close the door on other people, but because you are intrinsically better than somebody who's different. And that's the core mindset that we have to break, because we have a superior, inferior mindset. Oh, yeah. This group is inferior intrinsically as human beings. This group is superior intrinsically as human beings. Which means if I give him a shot, he will always be less than me, because he is intrinsically inferior as a human being. So I don't want to do that. I only want the best candidates.
Yeah.
And that's the first struggle that we have to work on. It's the superior mindset and the inferiority complex that has been driven into one particular group, and that has been driven into another group, that from birth, you believe you're better. And this other group, from birth, you believe you're lower. And every time somebody says that, I'm like, because you think you're better. You think there's nobody else who's as good as you that doesn't look like you, that didn't come from your background. You think the minute you open the door, if that lady comes in here, she's going to be less. She's going to be less. Why? Because only me and people like me are good. They are less. It's us and them, and we are always better. So that's an argument that comes from a concept and a mindset that's centuries old, that we have to war against and help people understand you are not intrinsically superior, and look at the other group and say you are not intrinsically inferior. Everybody's an individual, and there are good people on this side that are qualified, that have the experience, that have the skill set, and there are people on that side that are not qualified, that don't have the skill set. And you don't get the job because you come from this group. You get the job because you're good. And you are not good because you were born in this particular demographic, which means all of you are better than the people who were born in that particular demographic. And that's the first thing we have to address. Yeah. So before we deal with specific arguments, we have to deal with mindsets, and we have to deal with culture, because that is what drives the arguments. And I wouldn't lie to you, I've heard that before, and I've had to deal with that. I've had to deal with inferiority complexes.
Oh, I bet.
Thinking I'm less, and having to prove myself, always being more qualified than the other people. Making sure if they got a bachelor's, I got a master's.
Yeah.
Making sure if they got 10 years experience, I got 15. Why? Because I think I'm less than that person, so I got to do extra. They're working 40 hours, I'm going to work 60. They're good at what they do, I'm good at twice what that person will do. That person says, I'll stay extra, I'll stay 2. Why? Because I'm superior and I'm inferior. So one group feels like they always have to do more to prove themselves. So now I have to flip it. And now I'm very, very forthcoming. I don't care who the person is. I'll tell you straight up. I was like, listen, I'm not proving myself to anybody. I was like, if you don't think I'm worth it, that's your business, and you're going to find out one day who I am. But I don't need to prove myself to you. I don't need your validation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You don't have to tell me I'm somebody. I was like, I don't need that from you. And as a result, I'm also not going to make people feel like they need that. So as a result, when you see somebody who doesn't look like you get a particular job or get a promotion or get an offer, if you presume immediately that person got that job because they're a woman or because they come from that demographic, you have a superiority complex. And you think that person can't earn their spot like you earned yours. They can't be good enough. There's no way that person could have gone to school and gotten the degree. There's no way that person could have passed the PE exam just like you did and earned the right to be an engineer in this business. There's no way that person could have had 10 years of experience just like you and could do the job just like you because you're superior and that person's inferior. They just cannot be able to do it like you. You just better.
I feel like Donnell, there's a lot of coaching that we're going to be needing to do with a lot of people because that's exactly right. Egos, and I just posted something about egos before. Bill, do you want to respond to Donnell a little bit about that?
I absolutely do, and I think there are people. I'm going to give one example, and this is kind of personal, but my father's gone now, so he won't be offended. But I didn't realize when I was growing up that my father had some racist tendencies, and we were walking from the top. You know how it is. I don't know why it is, but it seems like all the grocery stores, the parking lot goes straight down to a low spot, and then you got the big grocery store, right? Does it always feel like you're going downhill, and then there's this puddle of water down at the bottom of it's raining, and there's a puddle of water out there in the road? I'm sorry, that's kind of a design thing, but I always noticed that, and I've designed grocery stores, but anyway. So me and my father are walking through the parking lot, and I'm in my 20s, maybe early 30s, and my dad, he's always way up there. He's probably in his 70s because I was born a little late, and so he's already about 70. And he fought in World War II, and so he hated Japanese people, one of the first thing, and I didn't know this, but he hated Jewish people because he thought it was all their fault, and he hated German people because they got us into this war.
Mm-hmm.
So we're walking down this parking lot. I'm getting to the story. And the car drove through. You're supposed to, in the South, especially, people are supposed to be, mindful of the people walking and slow down, stop, let the people walk by. Well, this guy just drove right on through and splashed us with water. And my dad said something that shocked me because I had been with him my whole life and I never heard him say anything like, I've heard him talk about the Japanese people, but he said, "Stupid Jew." And I looked at my dad and I was kind of shocked, and I was like, "Daddy, how do you know that man is Jewish?" And he said, "You can just tell." And he lived just like that. You can just tell. And I thought, I never knew my dad had that hatred in his heart, and it shocked me. And so I think what Donnell is hitting on, but I think some of us are not as blatantly superior feeling, but we may have those tendencies that we don't recognize. And I know you and I talked about this, Chad. It's like when I'm interviewing someone, and I've done that a lot more in my latter years than I did in my younger years. I interview people now, and I try to take a different mindset because they look different, or females can't do math, or whatever those preconceived notions are in my head. I try to say, don't judge this person because they look different or talk different or their gender's different or their color's different or their height or stature or whatever's different. Don't judge that person based on what they look like. Try to find out what, and with me, I'm going to go ahead and admit it. There's a blatant tendency to judge introverts because they don't talk, and I talk all the time. So I want to judge them because I can't have an introvert. They'll never even be able to talk to the public. I won't even be able to send them out in the field. Those are the kind of things that I struggle with. It's not that I'm better. It's like they can't do that job because they're too quiet. So those are the little things that we can do better. Think about what your mindset is when you walk into the interview. Do not judge people based on what you see or what you think. Let them tell you what they know.
Yeah. That's a good point, man. There's no introverts on this episode. That's for sure. All three of us are definitely outside that box. There's no doubt. Okay. Wow. This is good stuff. I thank you for sharing that, Bill. That story is, it's a lot, I'm sure, to share that kind of stuff. Cause it is, it's entrenched in generations and centuries, like Donnell was pointing at, of like our families and our dynamics of how we were brought up. This is all just hereditary, just progress. Like we're getting out of it, but it's taking a while, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're getting there slowly but surely, it seems sometimes. But we're the whole country of America is going through a revolution of this stuff right now. I mean, that's you see it every day in the news. But let's go back on to another question for you, Bill. How are organizations adopting to this demographic shift in the workplace? What strategies are being implemented to foster a more inclusive environment?
Well, I think training is something that we've all gone through, and I think it's helping. I started early on. I was with a company called CDM Smith, and we had diversity training. That was the first time I ever had it, I believe. I may have had some at the City of Columbia, but having those training sessions opens your mind to the things that you may have laughed at before, or the jokes. Like I actually I'm kind of I'm y'all both know me pretty well. I'm kind of in your face. Like if you say something that's out of line, I might jump right in. And somebody was saying something to me the other day, and I said that is just pretty much a racist statement. Why would you say that? I said, did you mean it like that? No, I didn't mean it like that. Well, that's the way it's coming across. And so just to confront people, that you don't have to be mean about it, but just say what exactly did you mean by that statement? Because I think I'm perceiving that you're saying it in a way that's demeaning. Is that what you meant? Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, then you'll get people to start thinking about, what did I say? Maybe I should change the way I'm speaking about these things. Don't laugh at those racist jokes. Don't laugh at those demeaning jokes about the blonde women. Those kind of things. And I've laughed at the blonde women jokes. I mean, I'm guilty as anybody else. I'm not saying I have never done anything wrong, but I think change is what we want to embrace.
Yeah. You know how many times my kids canceled me because I thought I was joking, and they're like, "You're canceled." I'm like, what did I say?
What?
Like, I didn't know what I did. Like, I didn't know what I did wrong. I don't even know what that. I didn't even know what it meant. Like, I don't know what that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a kind of, yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
No, it's fine.
yeah. Donnell, what are you? You're laughing. What are you thinking?
I mean,
He's laughed at the blonde jokes too.
it's a journey that we're all on,
I lost
and it's
I lost your audio a little bit.
are you
There you
still
go.
hearing me or not?
That's
Yeah.
that's better. Okay.
All right. It's a journey that we're all on, and it's a process, and none of us has arrived. And in each of our organizations, education is really important. It's a good first step because you want to have awareness and you want people to at least know better. As Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you can then do better. So it's important to make sure people know better. However, that's the starting point. And I told the CEO of my company one time, like a month or two ago, he was just fresh in, he just started as the CEO, and I was like, he has this initiative that he really wants to push. And I said, here's the deal. Think of a culture shift the way we changed our culture pertaining to safety. Think of the things we did to make safety a part of our culture. Now, contractors have been doing this for a long time. But now you see people like us, everybody in the industry, making safety important. And think of the
Mm-hmm.
things we did. We had training. We created accountability measures. We have KPIs. 6 months since our last loss making incident. We are so intentional to ensure that everybody's thinking safety so that we can then act safety. It's the same thing with DE&I. If we want to act differently, if we want to change our culture, then we have to change the thinking. And we have to look at a best practice like safety and say, how did we shift our culture where everybody's thinking safety now? Are there tools that exist that we use for that, and we can swap out and swap in DE&I, swap in inclusive thinking, swapping unbiased thinking into it? Because it really was a mindset thing. Because safety is no longer just actions for us, it's how we think. We think safe now. We're conscious of it. We're paying attention. We know that on Fridays, toward the end of the day, is when many of the injuries happen. So we're like, before Friday finishes, do not cut corners. Do not go up that ladder and not pay attention. Make sure you have on your gloves. Like all these things. Why? Because we've been trained. We've talked about it. We've been held accountable. We got to do the same thing with how we treat people, because that addresses the physical safety of people. But what about the psychological safety, the emotional safety of people, the mental safety of people? We got to treat it with the same level of care and use the best practices that we have implemented to address the physical safety of people, to address the other levels of safety, because people are getting hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Their hearts are being hurt.
It's true.
Their self-esteem is being hurt.
Yeah.
Their self-image is being hurt all the time. They didn't cut their hand, but somebody cut them down. The way they looked at them, with the way they spoke to them, with the way they treated them.
Yeah.
They didn't break anything, but they're broken inside. And I know what it's like. I've been there. Like, the thing about it is, the reason why I'm so vocal about this is because I've been through a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I've had to forgive a lot of people. I've had a lot of bitterness inside of my heart, a lot of anger for specific individuals that I went through bad experiences with in this industry, in the professional arena, who didn't respect me, who didn't treat me right, and things like that. But then I had to learn it's an inferiority, superiority situation. It's a cultural thing. It's hundreds of years of I'm better because I was born better, and you're less because you were born less. So now you have to prove yourself to me that you're worth my attention, you're worth the promotion you deserve, you're worth the raise you deserve, you're worth this job. You got to show me that you're worth it. Why? Because you're intrinsically inferior to me. And that is something that we're shifting, like we shifted with safety. The thinking of people.
Yeah.
It used to be an issue. Oh gosh, more safety stuff, more safety stuff. Now we understand why. Because people have died. People have gotten injured. We've lost productivity. And we sell those stories. We show the videos. We scare people into why they should be safe.
Right.
You don't want to be that guy who went through arc flash. You don't want that. Look at his face now. Look at his hands. You don't want that to be you. Like, these are the things we did. And that's for physical safety. And why not use these mechanisms?
Good stuff.
Shift our culture.
Yeah. Question for you, Donnell. How do you measure the success of DEI efforts, and what benchmarks or milestones do you strive for?
I think it depends, because DE and I, even though they're connected, they're also different. So diversity that has to do with the composition of the particular group or organization can be measured in quantitative ways. I mean, who do we have? And you can gather that data. You can gather demographic data. That is data that you can actually capture. That is diversity. Like, you can really tell using the numbers. And it's very important to have the numbers. Some people are like, well, the numbers don't matter. The numbers matter for everything.
Everything, yeah.
We've had a budget and be like, well, numbers don't matter. I don't care what the budget says. Nobody does that.
I hope
not.
I hope not.
You have limits for your treatment. Numbers don't matter. Forget the limits. We have discharge limits. Doesn't matter. Numbers don't matter. But then when it comes to people, numbers don't matter. Stop it. We know we care about the numbers. And it needs to matter who's in the room and where they're coming from and who's in the pool out there. How does it compare to what the greater society looks like?
Yeah.
How does it compare to the people that we serve? We're not asking you to go beyond the reality of where you are, but at least match that. So I can't be in a community that looks a certain way and not feel like I need to make some adjustments if my workforce is completely different. I got to think, are the people working for me even coming from this community? Because that's not what the community looks like. So I guess they're commuting to work because they don't look like this.
Yeah.
So why am I not reaching out to my local community? And inclusion is something that has to be a measure of the culture, which means that may be a little more qualitative. And those are questions that you ask in surveys. Those are questions that you get from studying behaviors. How much complaints am I getting? What are people saying? And turnover rates, and who's leaving and who's coming, and how's that work? And then how are people feeling about where they are?
Yeah.
And then there's equity that has so many layers. There's equity in terms of pay equity. Sometimes you have to look at pay equity or equity in terms of hiring equity, and then there's also equity in terms of services. Because you have a utility like Bill, are certain people getting more attention and more resources in our communities than other people? Because sometimes most of the calls don't come from the people who need the most help. They come from the people who feel the most privileged. Because if
Oh,
they
Oh,
call, you listen.
that's a whole nother
I can vouch for
podcast.
that, brother. I can vouch for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Good stuff. Bill, you want to add on to that? I do have a statistic question for you.
Yeah, I think when you start talking about that, it's the community is the place to draw the future. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. We're going to go to middle schools, high schools, colleges, and technical colleges around here, and look at the STEM and look at the other things that we can do to kind of grow up these people that we're looking for in the municipality are a little different than the engineering. We're looking for people that will live in the community. That many of my employees are my customers, so they live in my community. So now, how do I keep that going at a much faster rate? Because I got people retiring, so I need to pull those people in a little faster, but I can't do it overnight. We've got to start that process. And, that process starts in the local school, in the local technical college, in the local colleges. Those are the places where we're going to draw that future workforce. And they're going to look like the people in the community because we're going to the people's schools in our community. And that's where I'm trying to reach out.
Yeah.
We're trying to get an apprenticeship program going here locally. And that would be something that we could draw from. So.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers that you shared with me earlier from the NAWIA, I guess,
Yeah.
session. So age diversity in U.S. water sector, 67.9% are over 45. Gender
Mhm.
diversity in the U.S. water sector, 76% are males. And ethnic diversity in U.S. water sector is 83.6% are white, non-Hispanic, or Latino in color. That's the numbers that you shared with me other just this morning, Bill. So that's very interesting numbers. So how do we, I guess I had a question that was going to pop up there, but I'll give you one of the questions I have just lined up here. Can you share? This is for Bill. Can you share some practical strategies that have been effective in advancing your DEI within your organization? Like, have you executed some nice ways of bringing diversity into like Richland?
Well, every single interview that I do here at Richland County, we talk about our culture and we talk about how important it is. And we talk about the diversity that we have here at Richland County Utilities. And I think that setting the stage up front is like, if you don't like that, you might want to go look somewhere else because this is what we are. And this is how we're going to be. And we're a family. And I think that's really important. But I think those statistics, we have to be careful. I mean, I think suppose you're in a community that's 75% Latino. Well, then you should have more Latino in your workforce. Again, look at the demographics of your community.
Right.
That's what you want to kind of try to match. You don't want to try to fabricate, these statistics because then you're doing something like what we talked about earlier. Well, I've just got to plug numbers in, and I don't know about, I know Donnell can probably speak to this, but when you're an engineer and you got to make a spreadsheet come out with a certain number, you find a way to make it work. You're going to keep plugging those numbers in on that spreadsheet until it spits out the answer you're looking for. So you're going to just find warm bodies and start plugging them in, right? And that's not what we want to do. We want to make it look like our community. Let's don't fabricate numbers based on statistics that aren't real. The statistics need to match our community. And I think that's where, realism comes in.
Yeah.
Be realistic. But can we move the dial? Like it's, I know Donnell said it, and I love what you said. Hundreds of years we've been facing this. And I'm not going to go into the book, but I wanted to show y'all this book. There it is. So I just finished reading this book, and it was so enlightening for me as a white male that's not really experienced as much as a lot of other folks have experienced. And obviously, I've been on the more privileged side, even though I was a middle class. I still had a lot more opportunities and a lot more things, but this taught me how maybe people would have felt that had lived in this time zone
Mm-hmm.
in the 1800s, and I'd never kind of thought about that before. But I don't know. It goes back to the mindset. When you're trying to change the culture, let's move the dial. Let's try to be in a positive direction. Let's don't go backwards. Let's don't get into victimhood. Let's get to. I love what Donnell said. I don't need you to validate me. Let's teach people to be confident based on their skill sets. Make sure everybody has an opportunity to learn and grow and give them a chance. Like we talked about that inclusion. I think you'll go into that, but it's like being asked to come to the party is one thing, but being asked to dance is another thing.
Yeah.
Let's ask more people to dance, and let's let people be more comfortable on the dance floor where they know we're not making fun of them like that lady on Seinfeld that everybody made fun of when she danced. It's like, let's don't do that. Let's bring people to the dance floor so that they say, this is my family. I can be myself.
Yep. Love it. Good stuff. Danelle, did you want to respond to that? Because I have a question for you too.
Whatever he said was great.
So, okay. So, real quick question for you, Danelle. The end goal of DEI efforts, like what is going to be the end goal? Do you envision? What do you see in the future?
It's to change the culture.
Hmm.
Like, we are fighting against culture. The culture is like the current in the ocean. If we can shift the direction of the culture, it will bring everything along with it. And cultures are shaped by mindsets
Right.
that have been set over a long period of time. So these efforts have to be consistent and they have to develop over time. And we're going to tweak it and we're going to shift it each year based on where the needs are. But we got to keep going until people start thinking differently.
Yep.
One of the definitions of inclusion is sharing power. When the people who have the power start thinking it's okay to share it and not be afraid, not think it's a threat against themselves if they share the power, because I don't know what they're going to do if we give them some power. Anytime you have that stuff,
deep,
we can change that, where people start understanding there's intrinsic value in a human being just for being a human being.
Yeah.
And people are actually capable of good and bad, regardless of where they came from. So I no longer narrow down my perspective on someone based on my hundreds of years of tradition. But I begin to look at an individual and say, look at this person. Let me get to know him. Let me get to know her and realize there's value in this person just as a human being. And we shift the culture.
Yeah.
Because that's the goal here. We want this culture to change. We want the community who feels they're inferior to know you are not inferior. You have value and it's intrinsic, and you don't need anybody else to validate you, to tell you you have value. And then tell the group who's superior, you are not superior.
Yeah.
So stop acting like you run this whole thing, like everybody's got to listen to you, like you're better than everybody else, that you were born intrinsically better than me. You are not. So you are not inferior. You are not superior. Now let's start respecting one another as human beings.
That's deep. That's true. True. Bill, we'll end the same question with you. What's the end goal in your mind? What's your vision?
I think the end goal, we talked about that how does equity look? And it's like when you remove the systemic barrier, right? So for me, a perfect situation or the perfect arrival would be where people don't, it's kind of like that. I don't know, man. I'm kind of like deja vu in one of those John Lennon songs, about the people, all the people together. And, I think about how God values us individually, not based on our color or gender. He values us as people, like Donnell said. When everybody treats everybody like they want to be treated and like they're respecting the person's beliefs and that person's actions and the things that they're doing and the background that they come from, and you treat the person with dignity, and that's what I feel like we've arrived. And I feel like when people can stop talking about how I've been victim or I am a victim. No, well, we don't really have that because we've removed the systemic barrier. Let's remove the barrier so that we don't have that.
There's a ton of victimization out there, man. It's that you can leverage, and it's just it's a toxic place to be. You got to have a growth mindset. I know Donnell's big on that, and that's where we need to get everybody in a growth mindset, change of culture, and we all need to be together as one instead of divided.
Exactly.
Moving towards a better future for our country and the world, really. I mean, it's all over. It's not just one place, particularly in our country. But okay, guys, sorry we have to end this. I'm sure we could talk some more, but how can people get a hold of you, Donnell, and talk about your book, Donnell? Put that out there. It's a great book.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I am sitting right here. I got books all over.
How did you not have it ready? You're like, okay, I'm just kidding.
I wanted the effect of turning around and grabbing it. So I have a book, A New Mindskin, Innovation, Creativity, and Strategic Thinking for the Marketplace. And it's all about changing our thinking. It happened during the pandemic where everything was changing so quickly and people were struggling to catch up with all the changes. So the book is really about shifting the way we think. And there's an entire chapter on DE&I. So I did address it there, and I did present an argument of demonstrating that DE&I is not something new. It's a very, very old principle that goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I showed you which book originally had DE&I in it: diversity, equity, and inclusion, and helped provide a perspective for that. Because some of the people who are against it read that book, which makes no sense. Yeah. So I had to help those friends of ours to understand, no, that is from the book that you're reading. All 66 of them talk about this, and they help you understand. You know what I'm saying? So that's one way. So you want to find me, go on Amazon, look for A New Mindskin, and you're going to find my book, or Google it. There's no other A New Mindskin. So Google it, it's going to be me. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. As I tell folks, there's always new content. That's one of the places where I release new content for this community. So
love it. Love it.
Find me easy.
Really good. Thank you for joining us, Donnell. Bill, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, first of all, I just bought The New Mindskin, and you got to autograph it when I get to WebTech.
Oh, that's right. We're all going to see each other.
I'm bringing it with me so I can get you to sign it for me. Donnell's become a good friend. I admire him. I admire all he's done. From the time I've been here, I've really learned a lot from you, Donnell, and I've done research, and I wrote the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Charter for the Water Environment Association of South Carolina, using a lot of the material and history that Donnell has done in Georgia, and also at Webb. And so for me, you can find me. Obviously, one of the things I love is manhole covers and waterworks. And so if you go to Facebook and go to waterworks and manholes of the world, you'll find a cool and interesting page where we emphasize the work of the water workers, and we also emphasize water in general: the creeks, the rivers, the lakes, the ocean. And we'll have a lot of pictures that get posted of water tanks and water hydrants and manhole covers. And then the second place, you can also find me on LinkedIn. That is my preferred social media. So if you want to search me out on LinkedIn, please join and follow me, and we'll be glad to share ideas with you. That's how I met Chad.
Yeah, it is. Well, look, guys, I think you both are influential. You're disruptors in the space we're in. We're influencing a number of people out there to not just change themselves, but change the infrastructure, change we're doing things on a day-to-day. You guys all touched on those points. So thank you so much for sharing and giving the opportunity for the audience to learn more about DEI and just the way you guys think and their vision of where things are going in the future. So thanks for joining us.
Well, Chad, thanks for having us.
You guys have a great weekend. We'll talk at some other point in time soon.
All right. Yeah. Good to
see you later. Have a great weekend.
You too.